Olga Tokarczuk is one of the Polish authors who aroused the biggest contrasting emotions. The best evidence of this is a storm in the right-wing and public, or rather government-controlled media, after she received the Nobel Prize, or a recent campaign of returning the damaged books of the author, after her interview with Corriere della Sera, where Tokarczuk criticized the lack of a firm response from the European Union to the events in Belarus, and was total misunderstanding because title suggested that Tokarczuk equals Polak with Belarus, which was not in the text, but it was not important for the critics. Tokarczuk doesn't hide her beliefs. She supported the women's strike in Poland and repeatedly defended immigrants, democracy, or human rights. According to Stanisławski, a version from the side of the right and the government was caused by her one response at the TV interview. In 2015, just after Tokarczuk scooped Nike, the most prestigious literary award, so just before Nobel Prize. We intended the history of Poland as a tolerant and open country, a country that has never become stained with anything but to its minorities. Meanwhile, we did terrible things as colonizers, a national majority that suppressed my minority as slave owners or murderers of the Jews. According to Stanisławski, unfortunately, according to Stanisławski, because not according to me, unfortunate million times side sentence caused spontaneous, reluctant, and mostly hateful reactions. Tokarczuk hit the most sensitive point in the identity, memory, and history policy of the Law and Justice Party and its supporters. The Law and Justice accused predecessors and liberal media of cultivation the pedagogy of shame. In their opinion, the state should promote a pedagogy of pride, a model of history where Poles can be proud or think about themselves in a category of victims. A historical policy should dominate a discourse named in memory studies, heroes and victims discourse, with no place for the perpetrator's role. Dariusz Nowacki claims that polarization around Tokarczuk is caused by the deep division of Polish society. In his opinion, the conflict is almost atavistic and tribal, and also concerns the sphere of sensitivity. According to Nowacki, the Nobel Prize forces universal recognition and wants to invalidate the division. If an awarded author is recognized as an strange, as an alien, by one of the tribes, the resistance is natural. Nowacki quotes also an opinion of a priest, a poet, a literary critic, Jerzy Szynik, who on the one hand appreciates Tokarczuk's works, and on the other says that its non-Catholic character sees an insurmountable barrier. However, the crudest arguments against Tokarczuk are formulated in the pro-government weekly Do Rzeczy by Krzysztof Masson, the most famous right-oriented critic. In Tokarczuk's works, non-Poles, according to Masson, non-Poles are more important than Poles, non-Catholics are more important than Catholics, and animals are more important than people. There are more reasons for dissatisfaction with the work of the Nobel Prize winner, but the three levels, national, religious, and anthropological, of which the work of Tokarczuk is verified, seem to be central. And I will refer a little bit at this national level, religious and anthropological perspective. I would say that it's very posthumanistic. So Tokarczuk, I think it's important to mention that Tokarczuk is vegetarian, like Żywko. She thinks about animal in category of almost equal, non-human animal. Literature, in the famous interview from 2015, quoted above, Tokarczuk emphasized that we have to rewrite our history because it was written from one dominant, feudal and noble told from diverse perspectives. Literature has advantage over other fields in that you can use your imagination and intuition. It can find non-obvious points of view. You can look at history from the point of view of a woman, peasant woman, Jew, spirit, or animal. And this opens up new possibilities of perceiving the world. And I think this is her program, which was used in a Księgi Archiwowe, in the books of Jacob, where it's a really multifaceted, multi-perspective book. And of course, my character is a Jew, kind of now, this very credited Jew. And also we have perspective of some province Polish priest, who has perspective of minorities here in this book. For example, when one Polish poet wants to is ill and want to find someone who speaks Polish, it's impossible almost to find someone in Polish. So I think her model is an inclusive model. These voices are equal rights and consist together with a polyphonic choir. And I think this is this alter, of course, it's in literature, so in kind of maybe phantasmatic model, but this is a model of alternative society. It is quite interesting. Maybe animal doesn't have a voice in the book, maybe in one previous it has. But I prepared. I was wondering to give you some quotation or not. But after I realized, I was really surprised that Tokarczuk, although she received Nobel Prize 2 years ago, this book hasn't been translated into English. So this may be, so it's a kind of exclusive occasion to read my translation with some mistakes. Because the book will be published only on the 15th of November. Because it consists of 900 pages. So probably that's why the reason of so long period of translating. So we have here just this prologue is the beginning of the book, and the Yenta swallowed a paper with some mystic symbols, and and then she's between being alive and being dead, and she starts here his astral journey, and this is very important. Really, this is a very important narrative in the whole book, and it is equal. It's very important. It is equal narrative, equal voice in this polyphonic book. So I think we're very close to this model expressed in the interview in 2015. But more, Tokarczuk believes that literature in some way has the power to change humans' minds and finally the world. So she believes in the power of literature. I think that the author of Tender Narrator would agree with Originate that novel due to the transformative power of the arts and their capacity to mobilize individuals through imagination and affect may forge what Alison Landsberg has called prosthetic memory, that is a deep felt and empathic connection to events one has not lived through. Tokarczuk not only postulates the abandonment of the noble feudal narrative, but also distances herself from ethno-nationalism. In another interview, asked whether an ethnically pure nation professing one religion gives a sense of security and guarantee of identity, Tokarczuk responds, it is true, but an ethnically pure nation is a phantasm, a delusion. What will that mean? A nation is a psychological category, a kind of shared mentality, made up over the centuries of fears, obsession, hopes, and expectations. And I think is she aware of Anderson's concept of imaginary community. It also a sense of community understanding, but also automatic, collective, thoughtless reactions. In xenophobic theory, we do not think that we need these newcomers, their energy, youth, education, and war. Scoping neither word for the book of Jacob in the time of immigration crisis in 2015, Tokarczuk said that our book is a metaphor of what was happening at the gates of Europe. And Poles as a nation who believed that it was fighting for yours and our freedom, we had this Poles, during Polish uprising, this sentence was in a flag za wolność waszą i naszą, fighting for yours and our freedom, didn't pass the exam. According to Tokarczuk, the books of Jacob reminds us how difficult it is to assimilate, what costs are borne by newcomers to get through. But it also says that there are no ethnically pure societies, that there are no nations with separate gens, and what they have in common is language, culture, community, and solidarity. The first axis of dispute, the ethnic issue between Tokarczuk and her adversaries, is therefore very clear. It's conflict between two concepts of ethnic society, defined in English language theory as civic nationalism versus ethnic nationalism. And the second issue of dispute, the religious one, is, I will refer it using an example of the books of Jacob. The story plot of the books of Jacob, for those who haven't read it. The story is set in 1752. The mysterious newcomer from Smyrna begins to preach ideas that greatly introduce discord in the Jewish community. Jakub Frank announced that he is Messiah, which marks the birth of heresy within Judaism that later will be called Frankism. His messianic mission symbolically starts near the grave of Nathan of Gaza in Scotland. As the Messiah, he told his followers to disregard the limitation of tradition, dogma, and custom. In expectation of the great Messianic revolution, they rejected the Torah and Talmud in favor of the Kabbalah. And I promise some quotation, because you have to wait around 2 months for English version. So, and I want to show how Tokarczuk create the character of Frank using various perspectives. And also, I think it's quite interesting how he implement quite a complicated system of Nathan of Gaza and Shabbatai Sevi and his own theories in the plot. And here's an example. The first will be Olga, who didn't believe, and for her Frank is a trickster, and then we'll have Israel who started to believe that Frank is Messiah. It is not that Olga, Israel's wife, like a lot of the women is against the true believers, as they call themselves. They put the cart before a horse, for they aren't real true believers. Like a lot of the women, she doesn't like Jacob, especially when she sees him praying without deafening. He's spinning around his stiff chapel. He plays carnival trickery with Olga. Jacob tells her to go to the boys' village where Christians bread. Olga refuses. Someone else brings the bread, and Jacob starts at him. Some people dare to reach out for the bread and risk sacrilege. He's also acting weird when he stops suddenly and touches his ears and his hearing voices. But he is the only one who hears. He speaks pointless things in an unknown language. He is repeating zizi and trembling. Moshe from Puchais explains that Jacob is repeating Masim Zarim, Masim Zarim. Strange is the concept of Shabbat Sevi. Dark of all the strange way, we are action and clear from uninitiated, but those initiated closest to the Jacob should know. All these things so far forbidden need to be done as the Christian bread in Ruach. And his Israel, her husband, who started to believe, but Israel thinks about the whole afternoon, with long-awaited messianic time has come. Jacob is right. The old law, Torah, no longer applies. Everything is the wrong way now. This thought fills Israel with fear. He sits on the bench and looks with his mouth open. How this world is getting weird so suddenly. He feels dizzy. In the yard, Jacob promises most strange deeds. They should be performed with care and ponderously. Breaking the old law is necessary. Only this shall hasten salvation. In the evening, Israel asked for Gentiles' bread. He's chewing it slowly, intensely. And last quotation, with the own concept, the secret coalition of Frank. He preaches this completely new religion. He says that now we have to get to it through the Ezra, through Christianity. Like Sabbatai come to Islam, because key way to salvation is to extract the seed of revelation from these religions and to connect them in one great God's revelation, Torah the Absolute. In this new final religion, three old religions will be joined together. After his word, some of the listeners split in the snow. Frank adopted Nathan's Gaza belief in the necessary apostasy of the Messiah and his sacramental nature of the descent into the realm of the character. He proclaims himself as the direct successor of Shabbatai Sevi. The conversion to Islam is paradoxical claim, successor of Shabbatai Sevi and converts with his followers to Catholicism. He interpreted Shabbatai Sevi conversion to Islam as a paradoxical claim of his messianic mission and final step of a holy sinfulness. When Jacob came back to Poland, he had a special letter from the Polish king who granted his safety. He had received it because he promised to the king and the Catholic authorities that he and his followers would be baptized. The ritual finally was followed by adopting baptized Jews to the noble families by giving them their coats of arms. This was a kind of unusual social advancement. The Jews who were one of the lowest social classes in the first Polish Republika, jumped into the noble class, the only class with full civic rights. According to Mikołaj Gliński, the Jewish families which followed Frank's example and converted to Christianity had already begun to play an important role in Polish society. In this first period, many Frankist families were able to secure their economic position. Their members became successful businessmen. They also played an important role in reformative efforts on sexuality and will become Polish patriots. Frankists were also said, according to Gershon Scholem, that the vast majority of Warsaw lawyers in the 1830s came from Frankist families. Many of them were building Polish intelligence. When Polish authorities had released that Frank is far from Catholic Orthodoxy, they decided to imprison him in the monastery of Częstochowa. And during his stay in monastery, the location of the most important and famous Polish malware god painting, Black Madonna, Czarna Madonna, Frank created a esoteric interpretation of the Christian concepts. He appropriated elements of Catholic Mariology, combining them with the concept of Shekinah, as well as third Christian and Sabbatian concept of the Messiah with the radically redefined concept of redemption. After 14 years, he was released by Russian troops and moved to Brno and Vienna. And finally, he settled in the Prince of Isenburg Castle, where he was making plans for the future independent Frankist state in Central Eastern Europe until he died in 1798. The books of Jacob is, according to Tokarczuk, also an apology of a heterodoxy. This addiction of heresy is like cutting off the source of our strength and shifting to neutral here. It is as if whole reservoir of fresh water was cemented and you can drink only water from a closed syrup. What I always lacked in Poland was solid heresy. Therefore, the unexpected appearance on Frank with his interpretation of Black Madonna Częstochowa as an incarnation of Shekinah put me on writing palette. And so this was the impulse after she decided to write a book about Jacob Frank. Alfred Whitehead said that religion is the deepest sort of loyalty to the world. For Tokarczuk, it is also the deepest sort of contestation. Each heresy represents an idea of change to their world. The construction of an existing faith leads immediately to new ideas for life and society. It leads to a contest of all concepts on the replacement with the new ones. The appearance of the heresy is always revolutionary and terrifying. According to Tokarczuk, a change of the perception of the religious order is at the same time a challenge against all human order. The heresy undermines the obviousness of current law and leads to a rebellion. Jacob Frank started his mission in Smyrna from a discussion about the dark side of God. The thought of God's imperfection or absence or disinterest in the creation changes the view of the world and other people. It also changes the accountability for disciples' action. For Tokarczuk is the most fascinating factor in the story of Jacob Frank. The mystic experience, the descent of the Holy Spirit, Ruach ha-Kodesh, on the group of people in a religious trance becomes the foundation of a great rebellion with its transgressive structures and institutions. We received a huge energy boost. It supported the self-aware middle class, intelligentsia, Polish culture. Thanks to Frank's heresy, Polish literature was influenced by esoteric threads that were very significant for Polish romanticism, a phenomenon essential for our identity. Looking from this perspective, every new year we should wish each other, may we all see an interesting heresy. And we have this a link between our key lecture and Tokarczuk and Jacob Frank, because Cecilia Szymańska, wife of Mickiewicz, was from Frankist family. listening, so these connections will influence his thought. I'm not research on this game, so I can draw it. So thank you for attention.
Thank you.